Okay, we have a really, really exciting fireside discussion right now. So I'm going to take no time out. I'm going to invite Nick and Nelly to come up and join us. And everyone, please give them a big hand.
I'm living in that 21st century, doing something mean to it, do it better than anybody you ever seen.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's
Hi,
such
guys.
a pleasure to be here. Wow, those lights are bright, aren't they? Wow. Good morning. My name is Nick Blunden. I am the president of the Business of Fashion. It's such a pleasure to be back here at NFT Paris after being here last year. And I'm absolutely thrilled, Nelly, to be sharing a stage with you to have a conversation about both the potential and the paradox of luxury and Web3. I'm sure Nelly doesn't need an introduction, but she is the VP of Digital Innovation, Head of Web3 and Metaverse at LVMH. So Nelly, thank you so much for joining us.
It's so good to be here. Hi, guys.
Nelly, we have so much to talk about, but I'd like to start, if you don't mind, because you have, I think, the coolest job in the luxury industry. I'd like to just start by putting this conversation in a little bit of context and ask you to tell us a little bit about your journey to that job of Head of Web3 and Metaverse at LVMH. How did you get there?
Well, unfortunately, it is a very long story. So I am actually originally from Russia and Ghana. And so I moved to the US for university. And when I arrived there, I had to figure out how to cover my living expenses. And so while studying in undergrad, I had about 5 side jobs at any given point in time. One of them happened to be a 3D modeler and VR developer at the Stanford VR Lab. And the other one happened to be producing Dan Bonnet's cryptography course for the Stanford Online program. So I very accidentally, way back in 2005, got both into VR and into crypto because I had a bad shoe habit I had to support. And so I love telling this story because it actually underscores the importance of side hustle when it comes to innovation, because all of these things you fall into kind of accidentally. And so even in my career moving forward, I did 5 years at Deloitte doing consulting, 5 years leading innovation at Sephora. Things like crypto, Web3 were not a focus. And so in order to learn more about it, to embrace the community, we had to spend nights and weekends kind of hacking, reading white papers, discussing with the community. And so I think for people who are starting to just get into this space, it's important to understand that it won't be easy and you just have to be excited about it and spend time on the weekends reading about it. And then next thing you know, you'll have a really cool job.
I love that, and it speaks to the variety of the backgrounds of people that are here, and I think that speaks a lot to what the opportunity is, because people are coming at this space with different lived experiences, different backgrounds, so I think that's really important. Nelly, I want to ask you, and people have referenced this in previous conversations about where we are in the cycle, certainly from a luxury and fashion perspective, 2022, a lot of heat, a lot of talk in the industry about the potential of Web3. Later in 2023, things have quietened down a little bit. Where are we in 2024? When you think about the sort of adoption curve from a luxury perspective, where do you think we are with Web3 right now?
Yeah, and so I think Agnes and Ian and the rest of the crew have kind of laid out the landscape that, yes, the hype cycle is gone, we're waiting for more adoption, better UX, but I think practically for brands, the strategy of why you're entering Web3 is shifting. So when we first started, and brands that knew that this was something they wanted to experiment with, they would look at existing crypto users and say, okay, what is it about our strategy that we can do to appeal to that audience? And so for some brands where it was an easy alignment, so for example, our watch brands did really well, it made sense. And there were other brands where it wasn't a natural fit, but they forced themselves to launch a project that really didn't resonate, and that's when they got a lot of backlash. But now what we're starting to see is brands are saying, okay, it's still going to be either our current client or a potential client, but we're going to look at the aspects of Web3 that really, really make sense for us and almost put it behind the scenes and build a use case on top of that. So a very practical example is digital product passport. And oftentimes, consumers actually don't care or they don't know that there's blockchain behind it, but digital product passports are a really huge use case for us. And so we're leaning into the Aura blockchain technology to enable DPPs for a lot of our brands. And it is extremely relevant. For example, the consumer in China really cares that their product is authentic. And so this is really enabling all of our brands build trust with that consumer without, again, saying it's Web3 or without trying to appeal to an audience that's not authentic to them.
So that is a deliberate strategy to position some of those projects or initiatives without talking about the underlying technology.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a smart move. And do you think about that differently vis-a-vis the audience that you're talking to? You're very deliberately saying, right, if we are talking to a better established crypto audience, then we talk about the technology. If we're talking to perhaps a more mainstream audience, we don't?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have to figure out what is the intersection between your consumer, what they care about, and what we call the brand platform. What is the messaging for the brand? So we've had projects that were very focused on sustainability and all their NFT sales went to support an environmental cause versus for projects that are very much slated for a Web3 audience. You can definitely lean into the Web3 storytelling a little bit. So that's what Hennessy is doing. Hennessy is really leaning into different aspects of Web3, like community. They do a lot of co-creation. They have a metaverse quest that they launched when Kim Jones did a sneaker for Hennessy. But that approach won't work for other brands where, for example, they don't have a community. So saying that, well, Web3 is about community, so everyone should have a community makes no sense for a lot of brands because their clients don't want to talk to each other. They actually want a very, very special relationship with the brand. They want exclusive access. So for those type of maisons, maybe the strategy is to leverage Web3 specifically to offer that. So for example, the Dior B33 sneaker project had both a digital product passport on Aura and NFTs minted on Aura, and those NFTs gave the sneaker collectors access to a pre-sale later on. And sneaker clients actually really care about pre-sale. So that's when token gating makes a lot of sense.
I love those two examples. I just want to lift up a second, though. One of the things that I think people find most interesting about LVMH and Web3 is, at the one hand, you've got LVMH, this custodian of some of the most historic, impressive brands and maisons on the planet. And then you have this idea that there is this experimentation going on with Web3. And my sense is it's not just experimentation, that there is an underlying strategy that says what is the role going forward of Web3 at LVMH. Clearly it differs by brand, but overall there's a strategy. Can you talk to us about what that strategy is?
The biggest thing that we're always saying is you still have to be true to what your clients are coming to you for, which is the craftsmanship and the savoir-faire, meaning it's the product, it's the experiences like the stores and the fashion shows. So there's a reason why so many of the projects you see in the group have a tie-in back to the physical product. And it's very rare that you'll see anything that is digital only. And the idea is to expose clients to what the brand does and has been doing for hundreds of years, but use digital as a way to introduce them to it. Because you can't escape it. Digital is going to be a channel where a lot of future consumers will meet your brand first. So it's really important that you know how to use digital to communicate what your products are, the quality, the craftsmanship. But for LVMH, it's always about bringing it back to the physical. So another example is Fenty Beauty had an incredible activation on Roblox. And some people might think, well, Roblox is not very luxury, but it worked really well because it reached the right audience, which is a younger demographic. The engagement was about 4 weeks long, but it was amazing across all of our channels. So not only did Fenty have success on Roblox, but all the other channels like Instagram and YouTube saw a lot of traffic. And the actual experience was about lip gloss. And so now next year, they'll be picking a product that people designed in Roblox, voted on by the community and Rihanna, and they'll be making it. So again, you start off with the digital, you raise brand awareness, bring it back to the physical, and that is probably where the strategy ends generically, and then each brand then on its own will talk about what that expression is for them and their preferred channels.
And I really love that explanation, because one of the things that I was thinking about when I was preparing for this conversation is this paradox about a company that has invested so much in creating these incredible physical products, then experimenting with digital assets. But what you're really saying, that for the most part, it's the interrelationship between those two things, which is where the value is created, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I talked a little bit about the sort of where we are in the cycle. And I come from the business of fashion. We wrote a lot in 22 and 23 about the heat generated by Web3 and fashion and luxury. We then wrote more recently about some of the skepticism in the industry about, is this, is the potential real? And I think some of that skepticism came from this idea that the use cases for Web3 in luxury and fashion weren't as obvious as perhaps we were led to believe. But when I hear you talk about Fenty or the Via example that was given earlier, or all of these different things, it seems to me that you have at LVMH identified quite a number of different use cases. So can you just talk to me a little bit about what those use cases are? Do you look at the world and think, here are a series of use cases that we can apply to each of our brands, or is it not as simple as that?
I think we try and highlight at least some kind of buckets of opportunities that the brands can then decide what they want to pursue. Again, a very obvious one is the digital product passport, but even within that, we think about the consumer journey. So digital product passport, yes, it's great for meeting regulatory requirements, but what does it mean for the client? So if there's a consumer that actually cares about the sustainability of, for example, the ingredients or the materials, the raw materials, then that's the messaging and that's the use case, which is what Loro Piana is leaning into. So they certify a lot of their yarns and materials on the Aura blockchain as well. And that is what they stand for, because that's kind of the core of their value proposition, is the quality of the materials. Versus if you look at, again, the sneaker example, or for example, Hublot does e-warranty on the blockchain. It's all about the after sales, and that's where the value comes. So we really try and look at, one, is it the storytelling, traceability? Is it authentication? Is it after sales? Or is it experiential, which is where the digital twin and the digital collectible comes in? Or is it storytelling, and then you're bringing all those assets then into the metaverse, which is where the topic of Gen AI and 3D comes into place as well.
And I really liked your comment earlier about community, so I just want to come back to that. My take from what you said is, a lot of people have talked about, well, the opportunity is around community, it's about creating communities. But I think what I heard you say is, that's great, but if you don't have a community, Web3 on its own isn't going to help you create that community, right? So you have to, it augments an existing community. It can be a catalyst for creating a community, but you have to do community stuff on top of it. It's not just a technological play, right?
I think that's exactly right. I think there's two topics in Web3 that come up a lot that I have like a controversial take on. So one is community.
Please tell us, Nelly. I love the controversy.
One is community, one is democratization, and the other one is loyalty. So again, in terms of community, not every consumer or client wants to be in a community. I tend to be just a lurker in a lot of my Discords and actually don't participate. And some people just, again, they want the exclusive experience with their brand, but they don't actually necessarily want to engage with other people. And so for some brands, community doesn't make sense. The same thing applies to loyalty. I think in traditional retailers, so I spent 5 years at Sephora, so for a retailer like Sephora, 100%, it makes so much sense. But if you're a brand that doesn't have a loyalty program, jumping onto Web3 saying it builds loyalty also doesn't make sense. And especially with loyalty programs, so much of it is very much buy one, get one free, or discount driven. And for luxury brands, a lot of them are trying to figure out, what does loyalty mean that still boosts brand desirability, rather than build bad habits in new consumers where they're actually chasing kind of like discounts and value. So again, luxury brands actually have a lot of work to do just to establish a definition of loyalty first before putting it on chain.
I love that, because that's such a great lead into my next question. I mentioned in my sort of preamble that there is potentially a little bit of a paradox between, or at the heart of the relationship between luxury and Web3. And I guess that paradox, it's hard to totally define, but something about accessibility and decentralization versus exclusivity. And I think previously, on a previous panel that I saw, you had said that maybe that there is a variant or a version of Web3 that needs to apply to luxury, that it's not just uniform. It cannot just be uniformly applied in luxury as it is in other industries. How do you feel about that paradox? Is that true, or am I picking on something that's not really there?
Well, I think it is true. Ian said he doesn't think that there's much of a difference. So there's definitely overlaps. And so first of all, even when Web3 says that they're demographic and accessible, I don't think that's true. I think the one thing is luxury has always been about being in the know, associating yourself with something that's exclusive and hip. And the reality is that that is very true in the Web3 space as well. So even though you say it's accessible, you kind of have to know the right people, get the alpha, have the extra crypto that you might invest if there's a cool NFT project that you want to buy into. So there's definitely still that idea of like taste exclusivity and flexing that is aligned between luxury and Web3. But yeah, there's absolutely the paradox, which is my third controversial take. And the third controversial take is not everything has to be democratic and accessible. I think, again, what luxury really does is it taps into a really human need to belong to something that's elevated, that helps you dream, and that's what I think a lot of luxury brands do really well. And so then the idea is to leverage Web3 for that exclusive access. Like you don't have to co-create everything. There's a reason why people love luxury products. They are huge fans of creative directors because they actually want to experience the taste and the artistry of the creative director, right? Not everyone, like, have you tried to like design your own sneaker sometimes online and you pick some colors and you're like, oh my God, I'm so bad at this. Someone please just tell me how to put this together. And I think it's the same thing with like this idea of co-creation. I think people want the brand to kind of inspire them and build these beautiful products and for them to feel that they belong to it.
It's interesting because often the most interesting things happen where there is something of a tension. And I actually think that tension between luxury and Web3, and maybe it is a tension, less a paradox, is a really interesting opportunity to apply different thinking about the way that Web3 plays out in the luxury space. So I'm fascinated by that. Just sort of looking forward a bit, there's so much change happening in this space. Apple come out with the Vision Pro, and then suddenly we're talking about, VR and 3D and AR. And I'm interested to know, how important do you think those things are, particularly VR and 3D, in terms of LVMH's, the ability for a company like LVMH to generate utility out of Web3? Is it a fundamental part of it, or is it just one element?
It's a huge part of it because the promise of Web3 is that you're going to want to have ownership in the digital world. And right now, there's still a lack of platforms where most people can actually flex their possessions. So we see it in platforms like Roblox and Fortnite, but for someone who's not a gamer, other than putting a cool Zoom background or like some virtual lipstick on your screen, there's actually not that many moments where you can actually show off your digital collectibles. And so this idea of Web3, immersive, and spatial technology becoming more widely accepted is giving us additional channels where our digital assets actually can be displayed and will be seen.
And speaking of sort of the future and where things go, and you mentioned Roblox and some of the gaming stuff, I was really interested. Last year, LVMH announced a strategic partnership, I think, with Epic Games. And those partnerships seem to be, from a sort of LVMH perspective, an important part of your overall strategy. Can you just talk about that? Is a very high-profile example of two, very successful companies coming together and creating something, I think, new. Can you just talk to me about how that works?
Yeah, it's a very exciting partnership, and I have to say, the 8-year-old Nelly would spend her time either looking at Vogue magazine or playing video games on my PC. So to sit in a room at LVMH HQ with Epic Games talking about a partnership, it would have blown her mind. So it's very exciting for us. The reason that we went into that space is what Unreal Engine and a lot of Epic's tooling provides is the highest quality of rendering for products. And so when it came to presenting this concept of metaverse and gaming to a lot of our maisons, they would very often look at the rendering and what the products ended up looking like in this experience and say, we're losing so much. This is not what we stand for. We really want that all the details, the grain of the leather, the shine of the buckle, all of those elements still really need to be present in a lot of these digital channels. And so we found that working in Unreal was where the 3D models had the highest level of quality that we wanted. wanted. And so then it makes sense for us to collaborate with Epic to really almost invent what the future of a luxury digital experience could look like, both from the quality of the products themselves, but as well as like the storytelling, the environments, the gaming, the avatars. How can that in the digital world come as close as possible to what it is we do in the physical space? Because again, like the reality is half of Gen Z prefer to shop online. For most clients now, when they hear about a brand from, you know, a TikTok influencer on YouTube, the first thing they do is search for the brand online as well. They're not going into the store. So again, that first moment and interaction really has to convey as much as possible to that consumer about what that product looks like. So that's why that partnership is really significant for us.
It just sparks, which isn't on my list of questions, apologies, Nelly, but the thought for me, how much evangelizing are you having to do when you go and talk to the creative people at the heart of the Maisons at LVMH about this opportunity? Is it a hard sell, or is it, we get the opportunity, Nelly, but you know, we need more things like the Unreal Engine to help us realize our vision?
I think, again, it depends on the teams and the brands. We have had amazing responses to that partnership, and you'll actually see a lot of the projects coming out of that over the course of the year. First of all, our teams are incredibly creative and very forward-looking. And so many of them were already working with Unreal on their own. I mean, you've seen a lot of the 3D products that Louis Vuitton showed off. Last year at VivaTech, they showed a fully immersive fashion show built in Unreal. There's also the VR experience that Agnès referred to, Agnières Immersif. Our brands have been experimenting with VR and AR for a really long time. And so when they were faced with this opportunity to push even higher what we're calling the digital craftsmanship, so many of them very quickly jumped onto it.
So I would judge from what you've said about that relationship with Epic, it is less about LVMH going into their spaces. It's less about LVMH brands in Fortnite and more about using Epic's technology to enhance this relationship between the physical and the digital.
That's exactly right, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Great stuff. You know, it's an incredibly innovative space. And I was also very interested that in addition to doing partnerships with sort of well-established companies like Epic, through the LVMH Innovation Awards, you're also sort of recognizing and working with companies that are earlier in their stage. So companies like Absolute Labs, I think, have done well as part of the LVMH Innovation Prize.
Yeah.
Do you see that as an important part of LVMH's role in this ecosystem, not just to work with the well-established players, but to encourage new entrants into the market?
Yeah, it's hugely important for us. So for the startups that are part of the program, obviously they get access to our various maisons. But for LVMH, the reason we established that category, which is new, by the way, of Web3 immersive and digital experiences, is one, to signal to the world that this is something that LVMH takes very seriously. And two, to encourage startups to actually think about use cases that they might not have actually thought about. So basically partnering with these very smart teams and exposing them to the world of luxury, educating them on, for example, the importance of the quality of the product or the importance of how special the relationship is with a client, for example. And so this is an opportunity for us to almost push the evolution of tech in a direction that actually aligns better with what LVMH Maisons want to see.
And I think that's really smart because, as I said, some of the skepticism in this space was fashion and luxury brands saying, well, you know, we don't see the use cases. And that's one approach, is say, well, we don't use them, so we're just going to step back. The other is to say, well, look, this is the future, and we need to lean in and, you know, help the technology meet the needs of the customer, right?
Yes, exactly.
Good stuff. I'm conscious of time, Nelly, and I want to sort of, we've talked about where we were, we've talked about where we are. I want to look forward a little bit. I know these questions are very difficult to answer, but if you sort of look forward about how the evolution of Web3 and luxury plays out over the next 5 years, what particular things are you looking at and thinking, you know, we've talked a bit about this becoming mainstream. I think Ian said 10 to 15 years. Yep. But if you look over the next 5 years, what is it that helps this really establish Web3 in the luxury space?
I think the previous panel mentioned a couple of things that I fully agree with. Again, the explosion of the amount of real and fake content, thanks to Gen AI, will be one that will probably a great use case for Web3. The growing adoption of spatial computing and devices like Apple Vision Pro, which I think is still way too early those will encourage the kind of like wider adoption as well. I am very excited for Web3 to very much disappear into the background and for it to not even be a point of consideration. So this idea that the moment you log into an experience or a website, your digital identity and your digital assets are automatically a part of your digital experience, with the client experience being frictionless, easy to use, easy to understand. That is my biggest hope for the space, and I know we're getting there. There's so many exciting things we're looking at, like wallet as a service, very much kind of like the easy transition between digital product passport, digital twins. I think all of those things that make it super easy for the client, so being super client-centric in terms of Web3 is the biggest thing I'm working on with all our various teams.
And I get the impression, talking to people in the industry, that having been through the hype and then through perhaps the disillusionment phase, there are a lot of other companies in the industry looking at LVMH and saying, oh, wow, if LVMH are doing it, this is real, right? And so without giving away the sort of secret sauce, I'd be interested, for any thoughts you might have on how other businesses looking forward over the next 5 years, looking at this becoming mainstream, should be trying to apply the lessons that you've learned clearly over the successes you've had in recent years. How do you get this done? People look at it and go, I want to innovate, Web3 is a really interesting space, but there's a lot of barriers. How do you do it?
I think there's a couple of things. You can't imagine the number of projects that were killed. So knowing how to kill your darlings and not launch anything for the sake of launching it that would be kind of destructive to your brand is really important. The second thing is really tapping into the power of the talent that you already have. I mentioned at the beginning that all things innovation are a side hustle. And so I think a lot of brands, if they kind of ask internally, will find teams who are already coding on the side. They might be, 3D developers on the side, they're whales, but the CEO doesn't know it. So tapping into the talent of your existing teams, because those are the guys who already know your business super well. So they know the challenges, they know the use cases, and so enabling them to experiment in small ways and kind of bring in this kind of side or new knowledge to address the problems they're already thinking about every day is really powerful. And maybe not even necessarily thinking, oh my God, we need to hire a consulting company and figure out our Web3 strategy. It's actually probably could be something really small. Maybe it is turning on crypto payments on like one region for like 1 month to see what happens. Maybe it's doing something in Roblox for just 4 weeks instead of fully investing. I think those are probably the key to the success, right? So not doing a lot of stupid things, killing your darlings, finding your super talented, innovative, creative people, and then kind of like using their talent and knowledge of your business to build something very small first so that you can learn quickly.
I love the experimentation piece. But again, coming back to this idea of tension or paradox, is it harder to do experimentation when you're experimenting with brands with this incredible legacy, this incredible history, these incredible values, this incredible craftsmanship? Because, of course, when you experiment, there's always a risk that things don't quite go the way you planned. And I wonder whether that is a challenge that not is unique to luxury and Web3, but just adds a layer of complexity.
I think if I'm honest, it's been a blessing and a curse. Of course, I think everyone who works at a luxury brand at this high profile feels like a custodian of history, and you don't want like one thing that you do like completely ruin it. But the reality is that chances are it probably won't. And the blessing is that because the brand has such a high pull, even a small experiment will probably attract enough attention and excitement where you will learn a lot from it. And I think the one thing that's starting to happen more and more as we move into the digital space is people are adopting this mindset of it's okay to experiment and it's okay to learn. And I think the culture in general is very much receptive to that. And so there's not this fear of kind of like screwing up and doing something wrong, because you can always recover, learn, pivot, and evolve the strategy. And we've seen so many of our maisons do exactly that by listening to kind of feedback, engaging with the community. Like Hennessy, for example, is very active in their Discord, so they learn. Louis Vuitton always has events for VIA, and there's a lot of feedback, and they learn. And so it's a way to just keep getting better.
I think the learning thing is so important because this space is changing. I have a chance for one last question. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so I'm going to keep it very, very short and very simple. But Nelly, if you look forward over the next 12 months, what do you think is the most exciting development in this space right now as it relates to LVMH and luxury?
That's a tricky one. We have so much cooking. To me, we're starting to see all of the pieces that we're working on really come together. So this idea of blockchain enabling digital ownership and connecting to a physical product, using 3D to create a version of that product that looks excellent with amazing storytelling, and then Gen AI kind of as the engine behind it, powering the creation of a lot of these experiences. All of these things are coming together very quickly for us, and that's something I'm really, really excited to do.
Such an exciting space. We are out of time. Nelly, I could have spent another half an hour talking to you, so thank you so much. Please join me in thanking Nelly for her wonderful insight.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Such a pleasure. Nelly, I think you're staying here, so I'm going to exit stage left.
Absolutely. Fantastic discussion. Thank you. Nelly, get comfortable. I brought you another bottle of water.